6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, or Bacon's Law, is based on the concept that everyone is related within 6 degrees of each other.
My name is Bobby Griffith.
And in Kevin Bacon's game, the parlor game that's been created around this, the game is played in which you identify how you're related through movies. And in my particular case, I'm very proud, very, very proud, that I was in a movie called Prayers for Bobby.
I will be able to go back and remember what my life was like when I was a young and confused adolescent, desperately trying to understand myself in the world I live in.
Starring Sigourney Weaver. Sigourney Weaver was in Red Lights with Robert De Niro, and Robert De Niro was in Sleepers with Kevin Bacon. So in essence, I'm really, really close to Kevin Bacon. And if you see, this is my very, very famous role right here.
Many years from now,
I'm on the screen for about a half a second, not long enough for anyone to even notice me. Well, when it comes to relationships within probate, there is a statute that identifies how we decide whether somebody is a relative for purposes of inheriting. And in the case of a will, when you have a will or a trust, you get to set forth who inherits and who receives. But when you don't have a will, and the assets are going to flow through your probate estate through a concept called intestacy, which simply means without a will, there is a statute that governs how everyone is related. So, for example, if you are survived by a spouse and children, under the laws of intestacy, those individuals would be the ones that would be heirs at law of your estate. We don't worry about cousins and distant relatives because under the intestate laws, it is presuming that the government understands how you'd want your estate to be distributed if you had had the opportunity to have expressed it in the form of a testamentary document like a will. So what happens, of course, when you're not a surviving spouse, or there is no surviving spouse or children? Then we start looking at other family members. So we go to parents, grandparents, we have siblings, often cousins, nieces, nephews, and so on. And what we do is we map those out and we follow the intestate statute to decide whether somebody is an intestate heir, a person that would be entitled to receive under the laws of intestacy. Now, there's all sorts of interesting rules around this, and in some places, depending on where you're watching this video, the intestate distribution can have rules about what happens if the parent of that person dies. Do they receive it per stirpes, per capita, or some blend of that? The best way to think of this is, let's assume that somebody died with no spouse and 3 children. And one of those 3 children have died, leaving grandchildren. Do the grandchildren take the share that their parent would have received? Do the grandchildren, if there's 2 grandchildren of one deceased parent, but 5 grandchildren of another deceased parent, do they share 1/7 because there were 7 total grandchildren? Or do the 2 and the 5 share disproportionately? These are issues that are defined within intestate statutes. It's very important that you follow them. The other issue relates to things like half-sibling or step-sibling. The intestate statutes define whether a half-sibling inherits, and in Michigan, a half-sibling is considered a sibling for purposes, or a child for purposes of intestate succession. Stepchildren, not the case. So again, we follow the statute very carefully to ensure that we understand the rules. And in fact, once you identify the family tree and you identify who the intestate heirs are, then the statute prescribes how each person's going to share. For example, if there's $1 million, how much of it goes immediately to the surviving spouse before it goes to the children? What happens if the children of the surviving spouse, what happens if none of the children are children of the surviving spouse, or some are and some are not? Most intestate statutes define specifically in dollar amounts or percentages how much each would take depending on the particulars of the relationships that exist between those families in relationship. So I had a lot of fun kind of being able to share the fact that I was a movie star for a blink moment of time. It's probably my 10 seconds of fame, of which no human being who watched the movie Prayers for Bobby ever contacted me and said, I saw you in the movie. It happened so fast that nobody would notice. If you've got questions about the separation, the relationship concepts that I've expressed in this discussion about intestate succession, or how to define whether somebody is an heir at law, we're happy to discuss it. 877-YOUR-FIRM, or visit us at www.theprobatepro.com.